Some more of the scene, Charlie. Well?
And now, here he is, a man of God, living in a world of Disney.
Ouch, Charlie!
CharLee Simons.
Charlie bit me.
Stupid technical crap. Oh, I hate it. Sorry. Having some glitchy stuff going on with the little system I use to bring these shows to you. I love doing the Hitmen series. Started this. I've had Lee Abrams on. He was the founder of rock radio as we know it. I've had some of the best people on. Jeff McNeil, the CEO of EMF, the guy who made K-Love and Air One, What It's Like Today, Mike Novak. I love talking radio because that's all I did my adult life. I was a DJ on the radio. I was the funny guy, so I was always doing the morning show, almost always. And it was just it was a dream career, and I say was as in past tense. I'm still on the air. I do what's called voice tracking. I'm on a couple of stations, one out in Maui, Hawaii, which is so funny, on a country station. I know. What? Yeah. But it's doing really well. And but it's not the same as actually being in the studio. When you could call me, you could call the studio line, the request line. You could ask for a song. You could say, you could laugh at something that I had said, or you could tell me how much you can't stand me. Whatever it was, didn't matter. And especially if you told me that you couldn't stand me, I would record you and I'd put you on the air. I love that. I miss that, the immediacy of radio too, because boom, it was on the air just that fast. If it was happening, it was on. We were the go-to for any kind of emergency situation for sure. And that's why there's an emergency broadcast system. That's what it used to be called before the government took it over and completely ruined it. The business was, I was very blessed that I got in when I did. I missed the heyday of top 40 radio, what they used to call boss radio, boss jocks, big booming voices and big delivery and bam, pow, that kind of stuff. And high energy, up, up, up. I loved that. I listened to KFI Los Angeles on skip, sitting in the driveway in my grandfather's pickup because I could tune it in Bakersfield, because at night AM radio bounces off the atmosphere and comes back down again. So I could actually listen to KFI in Los Angeles. I'm listening to extraordinary people, Terry Nelson, Jackson Armstrong. I could hear, what were their names? Loman and Barkley, the morning show. I could hear Rick Dees when he was on KHJ. I heard these extraordinarily talented people who were in the right place at the right time, and the cream rose to the top. And by the time I decided, you know what, that's what I want to do for a living, it was kind of going away. People were leaving AM because the music was better quality and better sound on FM. FM was more subdued in their approach and traditionally. But then right about the time I got out of college and into radio, and I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, top 40 made a comeback on FM. High energy top 40. And it was like never before. Personality Plus, where you had in the afternoon drive and nighttime slots, you'd have basically morning show personalities doing shows in those day parts because people loved it and they were entertained by it. And when I first started, it was a station called K-Pop, KPOP in Sacramento, 93.5 FM. And it was a K-Pop 93.5. I was 7 to midnight. That was my first big break into a large market radio. And from there, I went to San Francisco and I got to work on K-Hit 98.9 and Hot 97.7 down in San Jose. It was huge. And I got to be a part of it. I got to be a part of it. I was sad that I thought it was ending, and then it made a comeback. Because it's hard to keep great personalities down. We can connect with an audience, and I don't think I'm talking about like me being all that great because I say we, but we as in radio personalities know how to connect with an audience, know how to keep you entertained, keep you listening, keep you informed, keep you excited to be there. And the mantra always of most program directors, and I was one of them for a while in my career, they're the ones who run the radio station, decide what's going to go on the air and who's going to go on the air. That's what the program director at least used to do. The real exciting thing was connecting with an audience in such a way that when they would meet you somewhere at a remote broadcast or something out on the street, they recognize your voice because it's before internet. And you can see everybody's picture now, what they look like then, you didn't. And they would act like they knew you. And they start telling you about something you said like a year and a half, 2 years ago. Oh, that was so great. And, or this was the best compliment I ever got. When people would tell me this, I was going through a really hard time, CharLee. And I just got to where I look forward to listening to you every morning because you got me through that. I didn't know that. I was just doing my job, being that funny, goofy guy on the morning show. That always had such a powerful impact on me. That was the best compliment you could ever give me. I'm sorry you went through tough times, but wow, I'm glad I could be there for you and actually get paid for it. And there was a time we got paid well. I was one of those six-figure income guys. One of my guests on the show today, he was a big money maker. I know that. If you would take that radio then when he was at the height of his career and put it into now, he'd probably be one of those $1 million talents. But people don't seem to get that anymore, and they don't really care about that anymore. And that's because they get everything. They don't need radio. Get everything they want on their phone right here. Everything, including me broadcasting live. There it is. That's me right now on Facebook. You get everything. You don't have to wait for me to play your favorite song for you anymore. You don't have to wait for me to tell you what the weather's going to be like anymore. Boop, there it is. You don't have to wait for me to tell you what fun things are coming up this weekend, who's coming in concert. You don't need to wait for any of that. It's all right there. So people don't listen to the radio anymore. People under 40 seem like don't even know the difference between AM and FM. It's if it isn't dead, it's dying for the most part. So when I get to go back and get some of these guys on the air, men and women, talking about what it was like, it brings a lot of it back. And at first I thought, nobody's going to watch this. Nobody's going to care about this. But then I realized, wait, you grew up with us. You grew up with people like us. We were a part of your life. We were a big part of your life. So they're watching and they enjoy it. And I'm glad to bring to you, ladies and gentlemen, for your dining and dancing pleasure, here's a little something from WLS Chicago. I'm talking about Jeff Davis. What's up, buddy?
Well, everything's up these days.
You were one of my blood pressure. You were one of those. Everybody always makes the joke about, oh, you got a face for radio. You've got a face for television. You've done a lot of it too. Welcome to the show, by the way.
I'm sorry. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I've been a fan of yours for quite some time. I follow you on Facebook. You and I met somebody who became what I consider a great friend, thanks to you, named Paul Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
He was basically an automotive, I don't know if you call him a critic, but they would send him new vehicles and he'd drive them around and then write about them in big magazines like Car and Driver and so on. And he has his own website and his own magazine. It was an extraordinary gentleman and a broadcaster. And you worked with him at WLS in Chicago, didn't you?
He was a smart man, very smart. And I wish more people got to know him because he truly was very smart and bright and funny. One of the people that I really enjoyed so much and hated it when he left us. You know?
I'm not thinking of his last name now. He went to work for CBS and I worked with him there. Oh, I can't believe I can't think of his name all of a sudden. Bill, program director, extraordinary radio talent, also WLS Chicago. JJ Jeffrey, I worked with him. Yeah. He gave me my big break in radio. He was the owner of K-pop radio in Sacramento with Bob Fuller Jeffrey Group. JJ mentored me. He and I were getting together and just talking radio and discussing the at least once a week. and always over beer and tequila. He loved his little shot of tequila. He'd take a sip of beer, sip of tequila. He didn't shoot
Yeah.
it. And he would put his Pall Mall cigarettes in a cigarette holder
Yeah.
because he believed it cut down on the nicotine. So he had this cigarette holder thing going, and we're talking radio, and he's twisting his hair all the time.
That was one of his little habits.
God, I love that man. And he did not talk a lot about what he was or where he was, but others would talk about him. His partner, Bob Fuller, business partner, told me one time, JJ used to get in trouble for not cashing his checks. He made so much money that they
Yeah.
couldn't balance the books because they would, get his check and then he would never cash it, never put it in the bank or anything. He had a stack of checks sitting there because he lived so
Frugally.
simply.
It was
Yeah.
very frugal, very
Yeah.
frugal. And eventually, he ended up getting a radio station up in Maine and Portland, Maine. And that, I think, was his first station. And then he spanned out from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a great talent. But those are the kind of people that you and I got to work with. Great people. And you're one of them.
Thank you.
How old were you when you got your first big break? How did you get started?
Ooh, boy. My first, if you want to call it the first radio station, was WABB down in Mobile. I was just fresh out of college. I had
Mobile,
no
Alabama.
idea.
I've been there.
I love Mobile. It's a great town. But I was there for a couple of years and desperate to get out. I was offered a job at WHHY. It was more lateral than anything, so I decided to wait. My friend John Valentine was in the military. He was in the Air Force and stationed in Biloxi, and called me up one day and he said, "I'm getting ready to be stationed up in DC. Give me a tape and I'll bring it up and see if I can get you in up there." So I ended up being hired by WEAM in Arlington and was there for 7 months, which is a long time for that radio station because it was a swinging door. Then from there, went to WGH, from WGH to WLS. It was a very short time from Mobile to Chicago. It was very quick. And I think I was probably 23 when I went to WLS, which was pretty young.
Heck yeah, it is. I got my first break in San Francisco, which was considered a huge deal when I was 23, 24. But you didn't start out. Normally, if you were in a major market like that, you were well into your 30s normally.
True.
And you weren't a program director until you were in your 40s or later. And that's just how it was, especially in union markets, which San Francisco was when I was there.
Yeah.
You didn't run your own board. You had an engineer you had to point at or press a button for a buzzer to go off, and then they'd hit the next
Call
element.
for your microphone.
Yes. We could not even turn on our microphones.
That's right. Yeah,
we could hit the cough button, but we couldn't turn it on. We couldn't turn it off. And when you went into production, this was KSFO, which when it was owned by, still owned by ABC, but ABC is now owned by Disney, who has destroyed it. And then Disney sold it to Cumulus, which destroyed it even further. Or I think it's Cumulus now. Anyway, who cares? They've ruined radio. They've ruined it. Yeah. But you had to call an engineer in to hit record.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't hit the record button because it was a union thing.
I got in trouble at WLS because the people at that time, the jocks smoked in the studio, and there was a lot of carbon on the label. And I was cleaning the label one day, and I got cited by the union, the engineers union, for interfering in their job. I thought, whoa. And I
forgot about the cleaning thing because you would clean the heads on the cart machine so you get the cleanest, crispest sound.
Yeah, you would get citation from the union for that.
Yes.
Not my job. Not my job.
Just insane. Now, I think everybody's, unless you're big time, Glenn Beck or something, everybody's running their own board. And what I loved about Rick Dees at when he went from KHJ in Los Angeles to Kiss FM and was a owned morning drive for almost 2 decades there. What an amazing talent, amazing man. He insisted on not only running his own board, but he had his own studio with the original, anyone in the business knows what I'm about to say. It was a Gates dial top board, dial pot board, not sliders, dial pot board with remote starts down below, the button down below, you turn it up. And he had that rebuilt. That was in his studio with cart machines and he ran his own board and morning drive for almost 2 decades.
Well, the thing about running your own board, I really love the engineers. They were great. They were fun. They were pretty hip, and they did a great job. But having the creative control of running your own board was so different. And I had come from a place where I ran my own board. When I went to WLS, I had someone who did it for me, and almost felt a little handicapped. It's just like I would have mixed it differently than that. But still,
my mic would have been on. I had a funny comment right there. Oh. I know I got it. I'm not kidding about you couldn't turn your own microphone on or not.
It's true.
You had a cough button. That was it. But I want to bring somebody else into the mix too. And he's a lot of fun. He and I have worked at a couple of stations together, and I've followed his career all these years. And what I love the most about him is he and I share a love of what I still consider, no offense, Jeff, I still consider this the greatest top 40 radio station that I've ever heard in my life, and that was KFRC in San Francisco.
Great station, no doubt.
And that was when it was owned by RKO Radio.
Well, I worked for RKO at K Earth 101 here in LA, and I have to tell you, it was probably the best company I had ever worked for.
Great company.
They were amazing people.
You worked with then Shotgun Tom Kelly, another one of my heroes.
Yeah. Shotgun's a good friend. He's just one of the nicest people on the entire planet. Radio is not a consideration. He's among everybody I've ever known. He's probably one of the nicest people on the planet.
I completely agree. Well, this guy's like that. His name is Bill Shakespeare. He goes by Wild Bill on all the stations I ever worked with him on. And here he is now on Do Not Talk. And this is the 6th episode of Hitmen. Welcome to episode number 6. Wild Bill, what's going on?
Well, it's great to be here, Charlie. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm glad you made it. Jeff.
I love your work, by the way.
I haven't heard that before.
I doubt.
Bill was able to, I don't know how you found it. I don't know how you got it. But Jeff, the reason why I brought up KFRC is Bill found the original mobile studio. It was a GMC motorhome, this great big 25, 30-foot monstrosity. And
26 feet.
How long?
26 feet.
26. It's gigantic. And I was listening the day that they debuted that with Broadcasting Live on the Road. Bobby Ocean was in studio. Dr. Don Rose, of course. Dr. Don said it looked like a sturgeon because it had that pointy front, the fish, the sturgeon. So he started calling that on the air, calling it that, and it stuck. You found that motorhome somewhere, and you have refurbished it to its former absolute showroom glory.
Wow.
I did. The thing was, well, like everybody, when you're, going through your radio withdrawals, so to speak, when you're younger, I always wanted to work at KFRC. So I went to Chico State in Northern California, graduated with a degree in broadcast communications. And where do I go to work right away after I got out in the middle 80s is KFRC. Started in the promotions department, and all I wanted to do is obviously work next to the jocks. But I from the time I was in high school, like everybody else, loved the Sturgeon, the KFRC mobile studio. So where do they put me? Out of 7 people they hired, they made me the coordinator of the mobile studio. When I went for my interview, I actually had pictures in my back pocket that I had taken in like 1981, one of the first times it was ever out at the Golden Gate Bridge. So
I know, I was listening.
Phil Lurza was there, the chief engineer who had built it, program director, Dave Sholin. I mean, you name it, GM. Everyone was at these interviews. So when I pulled these out of the pocket, my back pocket, to hand them around the table, they knew I wasn't lying, that I was a fan, because these pictures were taken, 5 years previously. So that kind of made, I think, an impact on all the people at the table, especially Lurza. He just kept looking. He's like, "Wow, you're kind of locked in." So that made a difference.
You're either a true super fan, or we're gonna have to call the authorities, because
right. They were ready to send me away. But so I got the job, and then having worked in it for those years, like 85, 86. And to see it, it was repainted after it went to KHJ. It was in the orange, not in the blue, color scheme. And so when it came back, and it went through its changes, and then we changed format in late '86 summer, about August 11th, in fact, it
Was
was.
that when it went all game show?
No, that was '85. But
Jeff, Jeff,
that was a
they did not know what to do with this radio station. And RKO was in some kind of legal trouble. And so they had this brilliant idea of we're going to go all game show. They pulled
the
all the
Game
music,
Zone.
the game
Yeah.
zone, and they were literally doing, like on television, the $20,000 question, all that kind of stuff. They were doing game shows throughout the day, and it didn't work.
It was a consultant's idea.
Of
Walter
course.
Sabo, I'll say his name.
Well, he
And
also did car radio, if you remember that.
yes, at KHJ. That was on the side of the Sturgeon for a while.
It's another
And
disaster.
KFRC had to do that. The AMs had to do that to try to,
Yeah.
hey, signal, no mountains in the way. FM is this, and AM, you can get us clear in your car. But
Unless there's a lightning storm
yeah,
or you go through a tunnel.
Yeah.
and then you hear it. But so the Sturgeon was amazing, and that's what kept KFRC viable, because we're on the streets 7 days a week. We're all over the place every single day, and it was really cool. But the Game Zone, as you mentioned, Charlie, was the beginning of the end. I think KFRC was at like a 3.6 share. When they did the Game Zone, it went from a 3.6 share down to like a 1.7.
Ouch.
And
That had to cost
so
them a lot of money too, because you had to come up with all the prizes, and of course they were usually
prizes,
prizes
and it was
donated from
nothing to
advertising.
listen to. No one wanted to hear it. They'd go on for hours. In middays, they'd start this thing. You'd have one office against the other office, and then they'd come on and answer questions, and it was like Tune Out City.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, this is going to be a disaster, and it didn't work.
What
And
could they have
ratings,
done while we're talking about that? What could they have done differently? Do you think, Bill and Jeff? What do you think KFRC and KHJ in Los Angeles could have done differently to stay viable on the AM band but still play music? Was there any hope? Any way they could have gone?
I mean, do you want me to answer first, or Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know my thought. I would just take it a little older musically. Started carrying some of those oldies, which obviously
Replay
attract.
what you were playing that made you first famous.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
just
Yeah, I mean,
continue
all
that
those
whole,
60s, 70s, some of the early 80s. I mean,
because nobody
that's
was
what they're
really
doing
doing an
now.
oldies.
That's what
They
kept
weren't
a
doing
lot
an
of the,
oldies format then.
that's my opinion. I
I
mean, they
think
could
that's
have done that and kept doing what they're doing.
I think that's a good point, but the problem is that the internet came so much later. They could have used that as a springboard to keep them viable. But your
Right.
idea of playing the older music is nostalgic, and I think that probably if we go back in our little time machine and take a look at how radio was back in the probably 60s, a lot of those stations that were having problems were playing older music from the 40s and 50s. So radio is one of those businesses where you have to track with the audience. And I think that your idea would be a good one. But I also think, too, that one of the things that's missing in many radio stations today is an association with the community and getting out there and meeting people and actually promoting the radio station one-on-one. Because when you go out and meet someone, give you an example, if there may be an artist that you really are not a fan of musically, but you go to the concert, you go, wow, that was really fun. Maybe I'll get one of their albums. It's like that when you are in radio. You are, whether you realize it or not, a politician and of a sort, and you need to get out and meet people. You need to befriend them. People talk about, I met so-and-so the other day at, some event. It really is so important. And I think we've lost that aspect of radio. I know that you do voice tracking, and I've certainly done a share of that myself. There is no audience connection. I remember Art Roberts telling me years ago, he said, you have one listener. You communicate with that one listener. You make a connection with that one listener. Mm-hmm. And that is your audience. And I think when we don't go out and meet people, Space It Radio Station was made as a means of being a part of the community and serving the community, which I would argue that in major markets, sometimes that's a problem. That is one of the things that could have helped. I'm not saying it would have saved it, but it certainly would have been a good thing to do, is get out and meet people.
They were losing more and more advertising dollars too, because everybody was going over to FM. And eventually now it's affected FM as well, because it's just a smaller and smaller slice of the pie. and everybody's fighting for that a fraction of a share of listenership now. I mean,
Yeah.
it used to be the days of KFRC and KHJ in Los Angeles, same company, same lot. They swapped jocks a lot.
Yeah.
They used to get double digit ratings,
Mm-hmm.
which is unheard of now.
Well,
They
saturation of media is really a lot of it. You've got so many different ways that people can get their entertainment. And I think that the thing that is the difference between a radio station and someone listening to music on their iPad is the personality, someone who's on the radio. And a lot of times we don't have personality radio anymore. We've got people who just play music and give you time and temperature. And that's okay because they're not really paying for personalities the way they used to.
Yeah,
no,
well,
and
that should have changed. I mean, I
Yeah.
always said this. How many conventions, Billboard or whatever it was, do we sit in those giant conference halls and
Yeah.
all these consultants and PDs get up there? How are we going to save ourselves? This was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And we knew it was all coming. And everyone would sit there, with sitting on their hands. What are we going to do? The internet's coming and what we should have done is what they did in the 60s. What do we say about radio? What do the old boss jocks say? Theater of the mind.
Yep.
Make it fun. And this is, you can tell I'm passionate. I
Yeah.
believe in this. That's why I got into radio. I love the creativity. I love the interaction. I want that listener. And to homogenize it the way it has happened over the years, we went the other way. We just, time and temperature.
Yeah.
Consultant says, say this, open the mic and say this.
Yeah.
Don't do that. I remember I was berated for saying the artist with what was on the page of the binder.
Mhm.
really,
It's like I was almost fired. It's like, why are you giving me the artist? Well, because the listener wants to know. Well, you need to be in my office on Monday or what?
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
dang,
So I mean, here we
dang.
are, and there's not much left. We all talk about how boring terrestrial radio is today, and there's so many other mediums. We've got to be doing it better,
Yeah.
more creatively, more fun, and that's in my opinion, what is missing today. Um, and of course, ownerships have their opinions as well, which we know is not productive towards the creativity of the jock a lot of the times. But
Bill just
anyway.
mentioned something that I got a question, especially for you, Jeff.
Mhm.
What most people don't know as listeners is in every studio, at least in every one I ever worked in, there was this thing called the hotline.
Mhm.
And it actually, many of them had flashing red light to where
Yeah.
you did not miss it. And there were only a very few people who actually had that hotline phone number.
Mhm.
Program director, music director, promotions director, general manager, and usually the consultant.
Or a girl maybe that you like. Oh, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Or if you were having to call the jock that was in studio and let them know something's happening, I'm going to be there later, whatever. So we
Right.
all had the hotline number.
Mhm.
But when that hotline rang, you knew almost predominantly it wasn't good.
No.
It was going to be a bad call. Your
Yeah.
show was about to be ruined because it gets in your mind and you can't even get it out. You just got screamed at and cussed at for doing something that you thought was so innocuous and so ridiculous and innocent. And
Yeah.
they freaked.
Yeah.
JJ Jeffrey did that to me only one time in my entire career. And it just rocked my world because JJ didn't like something I did. And then he called me while I was on the air. Ay,
Yeah.
ay, ay. That
Yeah.
sucks. Do you have any examples of that, Jeff? Like when you were on the air?
On occasion, there there was one time where I was on WGH and we had two studios. We had Military Circle where I broadcast every single night. It was a showcase studio with a big window. It looked like 2001. It was a beautiful studio. One night I had to be from the Hampton Roads studio, which was completely different. And I walk in and no one has gone through the board with me and I have no idea what is going on. The turntable configuration was different. And so I put a record on, hit the start button. That was back in, of course, when we had the toggle switch, on the
Oh yeah,
potentiometer.
and it was funk.
But nothing. It was nothing. I'm going,
Nothing.
what the hell? And I looked back and the turntable that had nothing on it was spinning. And I went, God. And then the hotline rang and Lee Fowler called and he said, in my office tomorrow morning, I won't ever hear anything like that again. And this is an absolute true story. I went into his office the next morning. I was expecting to get fired. And I said, Lee, in my defense, the jock was on before me, left, did not show me how the studio was set up. And it's very different than the military circle studio. And he didn't even look at me. He was looking through papers, and I could tell he was really mad, and then he finally looked up and he said, one of these days you're going to be at WLS. He said, I know you will. He said, but if I ever hear anything like that again, you won't be here. I thought, wow. And it never did happen again, but still, it's that thing, when you get that call, you're in really big trouble, or it's some other informational thing. Now, if you've messed up, you usually know it, and that's the reason why that little light is lighting up. But I have a few stories like that, but that was probably the worst one.
Oh, man. How about you, Bill?
It happened a few times. It was a lot of times formatic things, not so much necessarily what I may have said or done, but or added in there. I don't want to say I took creative freedoms. I wasn't a big fan of, flipping the binder. I think we've all worked at the station where you turn the page and you either read or share what's on that page.
Liners.
I hated that. I just hate,
I'll ad-lib them, but reading them word for word, I was very bad at doing
that. And that's where I'd get myself in trouble most of the time. If I added anything or title artist or put anything in addition to that, it really set up. I remember a consultant, I think, called the PD one time. He was listening in. He was a new consultant, and he was just dissecting everything that the station was doing. When they're hired new, they've got to figure everything out. And
while he's on the air?
Oh, yeah. They're listening to every day part.
No, I mean calling the program director.
Oh, yeah. They called it while I was on the air. And the program director shared the message, the hotline. There's that anxiety with that blinking light going. And you're like, okay, please tell me that something is cool. Something. No, it's, hey, I just heard from the consultant. And, you really need to stay with what he's asking us to do. And, basically a formatic thing. Don't share this. Don't, turn the page, read what it, share what it says on the page and be done. That kind of thing. So I will share this as a program director, and this, I'll try to make it short, but I was out of town. I had a problem with the jock who's very creative, really, probably a really good jock. However, he went to the point of, he was on the air one day, and I'm driving back from San Francisco back to Reno, and I turned the station on, and I'm not going to use names. However, he decided that he was going to set up the Marty unit out in the parking lot of the station, and then had no board op or anything, but wanted to do
was a remote broadcast.
Yeah, a remote broadcast.
Didn't know.
He's just out there with a setup, no board op or anybody to push buttons with him. So he decides to go out there and do the weather live with the Marty unit with the weather bed that was built into the computer system.
Wow.
So it triggers, and that goes for about 1:20. Normally you hit the closer, about 20 once you're done with the weather. But he decides he's going to go out there so to let the computer run it for him. So here comes the weather sounder right out of a song, and then this thing sounds. But he's done with the weather in about 15 seconds. But there's no one to close anything. So he has to go on and keep going. Well, yeah, it's beautiful. Oh, I see some people driving around. Oh, look at the people down here in this car. Oh, they're waving at me. Oh, still got to fill another 45 seconds. Keeps going and going and going. I almost drove off the road. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? And it's still not filled. It was like, oh, it was killing me. And so it gets done, and there I am calling the hotline. And I'll use his name began with an M. I'm like, Mike, what in the heck are you doing, man? That was a train wreck. Well, yeah, I'm just trying to be creative. I said, no. And he started arguing with me.
Wow.
I said, if you ever do that again, you can pick up your stuff. And, I'm not like that. I don't want to be a hothead or the guy that hotlines anybody, but this was a mess. And I remember he argued. So I told him, I said, I'm almost to the station and you can pack your stuff and I'll finish your shift.
Wow.
But it was that bad. I mean, if I had a recording of it,
that's dangerous because now you've
Yeah,
told them that they're done, but they still have power of that microphone. I've heard
Yeah.
he did that.
stories
He
about
did
dudes
that.
who were fired and they took the what they used to call a bulk eraser, which you would have to
Oh
bulk
yeah.
erase very carefully, and it was just electromagnet.
Yeah.
Every cart as we call them, with music, commercial, whatever, both sides very carefully the
Yeah,
edges.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get the.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this one dude took a bulk eraser and all the carts with all the music and the commercials, up and down, erased every single thing they had in that studio, and then walked out. And it was
Well, he
nothing
used
but
the
trash.
mic on his next break after I called him on the hotline
Yeah.
to go off on me.
Yeah.
Oh, so my hotline just rings to the listeners, live mic. My boss just called me and just basically ripped me a new one. And basically this, that he's coming down here now, and this, that. And I, of course, I'm already fuming. Now my face is, the color of something out of hell.
That was a
And
lesson learned right there, buddy.
yeah, yeah, it was, he
Interesting
stayed
thing though.
on.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
go
Jeff.
ahead.
No, I was just saying, I wound up keeping him that day. I didn't let him go. We
No kidding.
Yeah, we reached an agreement, and he finished out the day and said he would never do it again, and he understood.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say,
anyway,
interesting. It's interesting to me though, because the way the listener hears that, they go, "Yeah, he's giving it to his boss." There's kind of an
yeah,
alliance between the
Oh yeah.
listener and the
sure,
complainer
sure,
on the radio. And
sure.
there's some people. Lou Jack was really good at this. He would constantly rail against management, and the listeners loved it.
As did I. That was part of my shtick as well.
It's
Right.
it's
Oh yeah,
fun.
I
that was
remember
always part
that.
of my shtick. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Now you worked with Bill Drake, didn't you, Bill? You didn't you do? Weren't you doing going to do a syndicated show with him at one time?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I did not. I mean, I'm very familiar with the Bill Drake formula, and
Yeah.
long time ago, but no, not directly.
Yeah. Because I thought he had done was going to do a syndicated oldie show or something like that. Might have been.
As you were a program director in your career as well, right, Jeff?
Never been a PD. Was asked if I wanted to be the PD at WLS. John Guerin asked me one day. I think he was getting ready to move out, and I told him, I said, I really appreciate it. It's very flattering, but I don't want to be. I don't want to be a daycare administrator because so many people that I know in radio, and I don't mean to, and I won't mention any names, but so many of them are very much like children, and they come to complain about some of the
Yeah.
stupidest things. I've seen them get up in arms. There was a situation where one very well known radio personality, I won't mention his name. We were in a meeting in the conference room, and he got into an argument with the program director and stormed out of there. And the PD runs after him. It was like, wow, that is just not called for. And I saw a lot of things like that, and I wanted to stay above the fray. I also felt, maybe I was wrong, but I felt that coming from the air side to be the program director, I would have less respect than someone who came in who was the program director,
Yeah.
just to be the PD. Another thing I was going to mention too earlier, we're talking about the theater of the mind, things like that. I do a lot of promos because that's my main business, is doing promos and liners for radio stations. A lot of times the program directors these days have so much on their plate. It used to be you had a PD who was a PD and that's it.
And
Now
you're running like 4 and 5 stations now.
Right.
not only that,
Operations manager.
well, they're handling paperwork. They're handling all the other things that were done by other people.
Right.
A lot of program directors are handling the music as well. They don't have time. I know it's a cop-out, but they don't have the time to be creative. I try to help the people that I work with out. I will change the copy if I can see an area where they missed something that would be very good to do. And sometimes I will do those promos twice, one the way they wrote it and one way the way I felt it should be done, and let them choose. But because I know that they're under a tremendous amount of pressure to do multiple jobs, and I know a lot of guys who are at that radio station for long hours, and after everybody else is home, they're still doing their job and they can't go
Sure.
home to their families because it's not done yet. It's
Yeah.
very unfair.
Right.
Yeah, there's no more 4 and hit the door where you had your 4-hour shift and gone. I did have, I've had this come up before too, describing what it's like doing a radio show every single day. And even though you had commercials and you had music to fill the time in between, so these dudes who are doing talk radio just amaze me.
Yeah.
Where they're filling almost nothing but straight content. But you had to do prep. I'd come in with a stack of prep all the time, jokes, ideas, artist information, all that kind of stuff. Before there was, again, internet, you just look it all up and go. But you had to bring it in with you. And people would go like, oh, 4-hour shift, that must be tough. But they didn't realize the energy and the level of almost every single day. And that's why morning guys in particular don't live all that long. Because we hit the ground running. We have to sound like we're happy to be there. We're at the studio 3, 4, 4:30 in the morning, and then hitting the ground running like we're happy to be there. Unlike somebody else who works early, doesn't have to sound that way. You're constantly elevated, and the adrenaline is always going. And when you get off the air and you come out of the studio, it was almost like,
wow. You just gave birth.
Well, to me, I thought it was sometimes like fighting a war, you know. You'd get off the air, and it would take hours, to come down from that. And it was like, wow. Or some days you'd get off the air, and it was like, man, that was really a great show. And the PD would say, you were a little off last night. You're going, what the hell did you listen to? And then other times they would say, you were great last night. And then you go,
thought you were off.
No, I
sucked. The worst show I ever did. But all right. Glad you liked it.
So maybe perception is not in your head, but in the heads of the listeners,
Exactly right. And we have these things called air checks. Almost every studio would have an engineer who would set up a cassette deck, basically.
Oh, yeah.
That would turn on to record only whenever the microphone was on.
Yeah.
So air checks was for us to be able to be critiqued by programming and to also critique ourselves, hear what we're doing. No better way to get better than to actually hear how you're really sounding. Yeah. And so air checks machines are great. And I've got boxes of cassettes still.
Yeah. They call them skimmers.
Yeah, that was it. The skimmer.
Yeah. Skimmer.
And we had these air check things going, but it left a record.
Yeah.
And I had one particular powerhouse, hot-headed program director one time who was almost every stinking day you had to be in his office going over an air check. So if it was something that I knew that he'd already nailed me for before, but I did it anyway by accident or whatever.
Yeah.
I got real good at taking the tape back and cutting that break out altogether.
I've done that.
But one time I got busted. Rick
Lippincott, I remember there was a time when
Rick Lippincott, there's a great name. You mentioned another name too I want to get back to, John Guerin. Guerin, one of my heroes.
Rick was a great guy and a dear friend of mine. And he wanted to hire me at KYUU, and it turned into a real legal problem because ABC said they would sue NBC because I was
That's too bad, because that was a great station.
I really wanted to come out west for years, but the company had a policy where they wanted the program directors to do air check sessions every week. And I remember the first time that Rick did it, went in and I had my cassette, and he put it aside and got out a deck of cards, and we started playing cards. And I said, aren't you going to do some kind of give me some idea of how I'm doing?
Critique.
He said, you know how you're doing. We're going to play some cards. We played anytime we had an air check session, it was always playing cards. He was
that
a fun
same
guy.
hothead PD, after I'd been working at that radio station for about a year, got to that point where he goes, yeah, you got it.
Or they make you critique it.
They
sit you down. It's like, what do you think?
You're a maverick. You're a maverick, CharLee, and that's who I hire. I hire mavericks and let them be mavericks after some tweaking, and you got it. And from there, he's right. From there, I got my first gig in San Francisco, and I just like boom, 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 boom. Things just took off.
Now, there's one thing that
great coaching.
But you bring up something that's really interesting to me, and that is that I have seen, and I'm sure you have as well, where they've hired someone because they really like their act, they like what they did, and then when they get to the station, they try to change them, and it ruins something that was a good formula in another market. Now,
what is that all about? Why did they do that crap?
I don't know.
And they all seem to do it.
I don't know. Maybe it's the control factor. I don't know, but it's really funny too because I've also seen program directors come into a market and say, well, we did this in Detroit. We're going to do that here. Well, Detroit's not LA. And they fail because they don't understand the nuances of the market they're in. And I think that's one of the things that'll cause a fatality, programming fatality, is to try to carbon copy what you did somewhere else, because it
That's
doesn't
where I
always
learned
work.
about regional hits from
Yeah.
the very first station I ever worked for. His name was Jeff Davis too, by the way. I think there's 287,000 Jeff Davises out there.
I trademarked it, by the way.
He
I
gave me my
trademarked the name.
very first, professional gig, and I was still in college, and we had huge regional hits in that
Yeah.
market. And this was Fresno market. We had huge hits there that no one else in the country was playing, and it was all because of this guy. He'd go, this sounds good. I like the sound of this. He'd take a chance. He'd start playing it. People start
Yeah.
calling and asking for it. Next thing you know, it's getting reported at the local record store, Tower Records, Warehouse, whatever it was. And people were buying it. And then other stations in bigger markets, you guys down in LA and out in Chicago and up in Nevada or San Francisco there, Bill, and they'd go, what's this song? What's this all about? Next thing you know, they're playing it too. This guy, one little Fresno radio DJ, was actually making hits out of a market like that.
Yeah.
You can't even get that done now. I don't even know if you could do that, but there are regional hits, and you're absolutely right. You better be shaping the sound, no matter what kind of a big corporation you are. Jeff is completely right. Just because it worked in Philly doesn't mean it's going to work in Stockton, California.
Yeah.
But that's what
you
they
can't
do.
go one size fits all, but that's what they're doing now, huh?
Well, all the consultants do, certainly.
Well, you take a song, for instance, like Gloria by the Shadows of Night was played heavily in Chicago rather than the Van Morrison version, which was played in other places. And the Shadows of Night were a Chicago band. And you had a number of acts out of Chicago that actually later became big hits. There's an interesting aside. When I went to work at WABB in Mobile, it was the summer of 1970. And I remember Bob McNeil, who's a dear friend of mine, said, we've got this new record by Eric Burdon and War. It's called Still the Wine. Is that what it is?
Spill the wine. Dig that girl.
And I said, we were playing that in my college station. He said, well, you can't have been playing it because it just got released. I said, well, we played it. And I said, I know the record very well. He said, well, I don't see how that could possibly be. A lot of music, which I don't know if it still happens that way, but a lot of music actually is played first on college stations. It gets first exposure there.
Oh, yeah.
But that was an instance that I thought was really odd because I knew that record and liked it. But
and it was exciting for us as radio people too, especially if you're a music director. You had I broke several songs when I had a PD in Sacramento, K-pop, that same hothead I was telling you about, former Navy SEAL, just a stud. And he'd go, Charlie, I got this new song coming in that they're really pushing. Why don't you do a little game with it tonight? So I do that, make it or break it kind of thing. Play it, should stay, do you like it? And I played it before anyone else. And then he started telling me, you hear something you like, you want to do that, do it every night. So Romeo Void, several other groups like that. I played them before anyone else. Yeah. And if you can get some recognition for that, even get yourself a gold record for it or something like that, that's so exciting, man, because we don't get a lot of accolades from the business, do we?
I'll tell you, there are times, too, when you discover a song. I remember in 74, I was in a Pizza Hut, and I kept hearing this record playing over and over again. I'd never heard before. So I go over to, somebody apparently put a lot of coins in and kept playing it over and over again. I go over to the jukebox, and I'm trying to find out what the record is, looking at it while it's spinning around, and it was a record called Lady by Styx. And the next day I went into the radio station, and Jim Smith, I said, Jim, I heard this record called Lady by Styx. It's really a damn good song. We should play it. And he said, well, Styx is a local group, and that record was out last year. It went nowhere. It was dead in the water. And I said, well, can I play it on my show on Saturday night? He said, I'll ask. He said, but I'm going to tell you, there's no chance in hell you'll get to play it because of the rules that ABC had for playing a record. And he said, well, I'll ask John if you can play it. So I go in on Friday, and I hadn't heard anything. I said, Jim, what about the Styx record? He said, all right, I'll ask John if you can play it. And John said, you can play it twice on your show. And so what I did, because I was on, my shift was the only one on Saturday nights, was completely in dark year round. So I played in the 10 o'clock hour and I played it in the midnight hour. I got 2 or 3 calls, I guess it was. And Monday, they asked me if I got any reaction to the record, and I lied. And I said, the phones rang off the wall. And they decided to put it in as a recurrent. And they had a sheet where each of us would have to cross off each time the record was requested. Each of us have to mark it off with our
yes, I
pen.
remember those.
Yeah.
I keeping track of the requests. Yeah,
But the thing is that they completely were unaware that I was in and out of the studio a lot as Jim Smith's assistant. And every time I went into the studio, I used a different colored pen, marked it on there. And by the end of the week, they had tons of requests that were probably about 90% of mine. And out of the Styx was in a at that time, they were in a lawsuit with Wooden Nickel Records, and Wooden Nickel sold the rights to Styx's music to A&M. And A&M promoted the record. The record became a hit after that. And then we jumped on Lorelei when that record came out. So I felt like I had some play in getting that group to be known by people, because I just loved that group. And to this day, we're still friends, me and the group.
Well, they were just out in my area and I couldn't get tickets, so I should call you.
You should have.
Hook me up.
I'll give a call.
Dennis DeYoung still the lead singer and all that?
Oh, Dennis has been gone from there a long time. There's a big lawsuit between the group members, JY and Tommy Shaw. They settled the lawsuit, but because of all the legal machinations, Dennis ended up, I think, getting less money than he would have gotten. And I know Dennis, but it was just sort of an oddity, because Tommy and I are good friends. Tommy lived across the street from me.
How can you not be friends with Tommy Shaw? One of the best people I've ever met in the business.
Another Alabama boy, but he and I were very good friends. We lived in the same apartment building in Chicago, and he moved across the street from me here in LA. And he told me that whole saga, and it was pretty sad, because Dennis was very creative. He wrote
extremely talented, brilliant,
incredibly talented,
but hard to work with. Definitely a control freak.
It's funny because I ran into Dennis. I think they had the Rockin' the Paradise tour or something like that, and I was in the studio for Pieces of Eight with them, and I go in backstage because I'm invited, as we sometimes are, and I said, "Hey, Denny, how you doing?" He didn't recognize me. It was weird. And I told Tommy, I said, Dennis didn't even know who I was. And he said, he's a little off. And I thought, wow, that's unreal. But those guys are great. JY is a dear friend, and has given me a lot of credit over the years. And
I so wanted to see them. I was disappointed I couldn't go. But the fact that they're even still touring is amazing. But you're telling me Dennis is not part of it, though.
No, he's not. He hasn't been with the band for years.
Okay,
a long time. He does go out and he does appearances as Dennis DeYoung,
like Lou Gramm does with Foreigner, kind of
exactly.
Separate themselves. Yeah.
But there's all kinds of contractual things that go on with record groups where they when they break up, they either have to go out as a soloist or have some weird, alliance where they could say of Styx or formerly of whatever the group is. And that was the way it was with Dennis.
I've hung out with so many musicians, movie stars, TV stars, and I never talk about it. Because for two reasons. I don't want people to go, oh, CharLee thinks he's all that. Or the worst thing you could never say to me is, yeah, right.
But sometimes.
Well, no, I did. I have. But with that in mind, I'd love to hear, especially you, Bill, because so much of your career was in Reno. And at the one point, it was like, competing with Vegas for entertainment capital of Nevada and the West Coast, Western region. You've got stories. about artists that you've hung out with, both good and bad. Give me a really great one and a really ridiculous bad one.
You know, the one actually that I remember actually happened in LA. We went down to the Billboard convention, and of course, that was at the same time as Kiss FM's Wango Tango.
Mm.
So we were down there, and everybody kind of clicks together, and everyone's having plenty of adult beverages. And but that night at LA Angels Stadium, Anaheim Stadium, they were having the Wango Tango show. So we're like, oh, we all piled in a limo, went over there, and we're just watching the show. And who's the final headliner is Mariah Carey. And she, Mariah is, I've met her a few times. I met her in 91 for the first time, but she was very humble and calm and quiet and, very, just a very nice person. But
Until you
not that
work with
she's
her.
not, but she's certainly changed over the years, as we know. But she came on at the end of the show. And because the show is so long, it's kind of an all day thing with different artists. She comes on at the end, and all she does is complain that someone put too much honey in her tea and that her voice is not right. And so she's trying to sing, and she's kind of doing little things. And, I don't know who did this to me. But long story short, she did her 3 songs or whatever it was. And that was the end of the show. Of course, we've been partying since about 3 o'clock, and it's now 10:30. So we're trying to beat the traffic out of the area. So we go booking out. We're backstage. So we ran out the back way. And of course, Bill, being the ridiculous fool that he is, there's the limo sitting there. I don't know who the hell's in it. I just see a limo, and everyone's running across the parking lot, and they kind of stop. Where are you going? I'm like, here's a limo here. So I instantly run up to the limo, put my hands on the edge of the window. It's down, the window's down. Poke my head in the limo, and Mariah is right there. She had just gotten in, and I scared the hell out of her. She like jumps backwards. I'm like, hey, how's it going? I see it's Mariah. I'm like, Mariah, great show. Sorry about the honey. Gotta go. Bam,
Sorry
out of
about
there.
the honey.
Anyway, and then took off. But that's my recollection of the whole thing. I'll always remember that today. And then Will Smith that same weekend, we were waiting on him at a record label thing, and there was all this spread of food and really good stuff. And they're like, "Where's Will Smith?" That was getting the jiggy with it and going to Miami time for Will. And so I remember I was with a bunch of other radio guys, and we're like, "We're not going to wait any longer. Let's get out of here." We were going to go to the Playboy Mansion, so we're going down the back stairs.
Of
We're not going
course
to
you
take.
were.
Yeah, well, we took the back way, but had these giant cookies, these chocolate chip cookies. Of course, more adult beverages during that day. And I run down in the stairs, and I'm zigzagging the stairs, and the guys are ahead of me. And I'm like kind of first way down. And there comes Will up in a Fila, all white Fila suit, like just everything white and his chains there. I'm like, Will, where you been? We've been waiting for you,
Where
man.
have you
And he's
been?
like, he just stopped and he smiles like, hey, he's all chill and laid back. Hey, man. I'm like, well, we got to go. Here, try one of these. I had cookies in my hand. I'm like, here, man, have one of these cookies. They're amazing. And he took a cookie from me. So I always say, I handed a cookie to Will Smith on the way out. And he was like, man, thank you. And DJ Jazzy Jeff from the Fresh Prince, man.
That's right.
So anyway, those are a couple.
We've been waiting for you. That's funny. How about you, Jeff?
Well, I don't really have any funny stories or anything like that where the artist is concerned. I interviewed so many of them, and I have to tell you, there are times when I have my office is stacked with tapes of people that I've interviewed, and there are times when I look at those tapes and I think somebody else did them, because it almost seems like another human being was sitting in that chair interviewing all these people. Many of them were people that I think I knew about when I was a kid, and here you are as an adult and you're sitting in a room with them. I think I really bonded very well with Kenny Rogers, because Kenny and I both he was a great photographer, and we talked mostly about photography. And my interview style, I will tell you one story that was a bit embarrassing, and it taught me a lesson. And that was my first interview at WLS was with Manfred Mann. And I had interviewed other people. Al Green, I knew him. That was a weird. Well, I don't want to back up and tell that story, but I will in a second. I had Manfred in the studio, and they were racking up the tape, and I had my questions all written out, on a legal pad. And he said, "Can you get me a Coke?" I should do that. So I didn't have any change.
Manfred?
So I had to go out and bum some change from someone and find a machine and brought it. I
Down the street.
I came back into the studio, and he's sitting there with my legal pad, crossing off
Crossing out questions.
And he
said,
it'd be better to ask this question this way. So that was an experience, I have to tell you, and it taught me a good lesson, and that is when you go into the studio to interview people, have all your questions in your head, and know something about those artists. And
the other cards and in your pocket.
Well, just don't let them see your questions. That's all.
Right.
So that was that. Al Green was a real trip because this was at WGH. He had bought a schedule, and they wanted me to go over to his hotel and do an interview with him. And they said, when you get done with it, just throw the tape away. And I thought, really? And I said, okay. So I went over there, and he had a robe on, and he was Al is very soft spoken. He's a reverend now, but he's like, "Can I get you something to drink?" And I said, "No, I'm fine." And he had champagne and stuff like that there, and I was not interested. So I recorded him, and he was, for some reason, I don't know why, but he was constantly calling the radio station to talk to the program director's secretary. And she's a really lovely black lady. And he invited her to be his guest at the concert.
I don't know why, Jeff says.
So Monday rolls around, and she comes in, and she's got 3 envelopes. She gives one to me, and she has one, and she has one for Jim Stewart, who was the PD at the time. And I look in the envelope, and there was like $50 or something like that in there. And I said, "We can't accept this." I was acting PD that day. And she said, "Why not?" I said, "Because of payola." I said, "Company policy will only allow you to have something that's at $25 or less." And she said, "Well, I'm keeping it." I said, "No, I don't think you are." And so I had to go to the general manager and tell him. And Ambert Deal was the GM. And he said, "No," I said, "that's a red flag big time." We couldn't get a hold of Al anymore because he had already left town. So we ended up, and she was so angry. God, she was just very angry about that. $50 back then was probably worth a lot more than it is now, but we ended up donating the money in his name to a children's charity. But those kind of things do happen. And, good people will do the responsible thing. And some people really like the fact that they can get snakeskin boots under their desk, by playing a record. And that,
dude.
So that does happen.
And I got
Or a
stories
Corvette.
about piles of cocaine that record people would come in and dump on the desk of the program director, and with the door open.
Oh, yeah.
And he's calling in jocks as we're walking by. I know, because I was one of them. Before I got saved, in the height of my career, 6-figure income, I'm doing blast on the program director's desk. That's the kind of guy I was, and that was the life it was. And
those were different days.
As Bill mentioned earlier, the booze. There's always booze everywhere, every event, backstage, wherever it is, there was always booze.
Yeah.
It's not a healthy lifestyle. At least it wasn't.
No, back in the day, we did a lot of things. I remember there was this big event at one of the Let Us Entertain You restaurants in Chicago, and they had the Chicago Bears. Those guys were huge. And one of the Bears he had his back to me, and he looks back and he said, "Hey, do you like to party?" And I didn't know what he was talking about. I'm from the South. I was naive, not that naive. But anyway, he had a couple of joints, hands them to me. And of course, I got together with a girl, and we smoked them, and nothing happened. And then about 15 minutes after we finished them, we were in the clouds because what had happened was that it was laced with coke, which causes a delay.
Oh, man.
And it's like a slingshot because the cocaine wears off quicker, but the marijuana is still there, and it's much more dramatic that way.
Oh, my goodness.
But the thing is, if you're using your voice for a living, it's not good to smoke anything, whether it's marijuana or cigarettes. So I don't do that
And
stuff.
I did both, and
Yeah.
cigars, and I
Yeah.
inhaled. Um, yeah, I was my own worst enemy in many ways.
Did
But
you know that woman though?
which one? Which one?
The one you forgot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I forget a woman? Oh, I forgot. Anyway, this is a great transition into normally when I do these radio specials, and I cherish this. I hope you gentlemen realize how much I enjoy this, and I'm so glad that you took the time to share stories with me and talk
Thank
about
you.
the business. I don't even bother
Absolutely.
talking. I mean, when we first started, I go, well, where do you think radio's going now? You know what? Screw that. I don't even care. It's all
Yeah.
corporate entities now. Bill Clinton ruined that with the deregulation of ownership rules with the FCC. He destroyed radio as we know it. It's
Yeah.
not coming back. It's not coming back. I don't believe so. And it's gone through a whole lot of changes. And every time it comes back, when everybody else says, oh, that's it, it's dead, and then it comes back again, I hope I'm wrong. However, I don't think at this point I'll be a part of it. Because for one thing, I'm enjoying this too much. I don't have a hotline in my studio. Nobody's calling me. But I got saved early or later in life. And I was
Really?
height of my career, 6-figure income, morning drive, San Francisco. And double-digit ratings, by the way, in several key demographics. We beat KGO 12 plus. Nobody had done that in
Nice.
15 years. And we owned it. We owned it. My picture's on billboards. That's the freakiest thing when you're driving by and you see
It
your
is.
stuff up there. Whoa.
Yeah.
On TV commercials and so on. Had it all that you're supposed to have in the business. And then I found the Lord. Or the
Mhm.
Lord found me. Well, actually, the Lord always knew where I was. I finally turned to Him, gave my life to Christ Jesus on a Friday, and when I was 31, and that Monday, I go on the air and start talking about it, and they freaked. Management freaked, especially because I had listeners calling, going, "Charlie, we've been praying for you." Actually, I was Tom at the time. They knew me as Tom Sterling.
Mhm.
We've been praying for you. We just kind of had a feeling. We just kind of knew. Really? So I'm putting them on the air. We're talking about Christ Jesus and giving our lives to Christ on this hip hop top 40 station in the fourth largest market in the nation that seems obsessed with worshiping the devil. I'm talking about Christ Jesus. Management, former Marine, drill sergeant, veins popping out of his forehead, spit flying out of his mouth. What the was that? Who the do you think you are? What the?
Really?
Losing his mind, this far away from my face, screaming at me. And I said, I'm a Christian now. I gave my life to Christ. I fucking heard that. I know already. Blah, 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 blah. And then the letter from the attorneys. You've broken your contract. You're not giving us the kind of show that we hired you to do. You've broken your contract. We release you from this contract.
Wow.
And that was it. And I went from first to worst, sleeping in my truck, volunteering at City Team Ministries at the Gospel Mission so I could eat twice a day. That's why I went from here to there. I don't share my testimony very often because I'm always afraid somebody will go, well, if I give my life to Jesus, you mean I'm going to lose everything? Maybe, if that's your calling. But I had to be humbled. I was an arrogant ass. I had to be humbled.
We've all had that.
And then the more involved I got in politics, the more I realized, well, I'll be darned. I'm a conservative.
Mhm.
And the business I've been in all my life has been lying not only to me, but to everyone else.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start exposing that. Ephesians 5:11, be no part of the works of darkness, but instead even expose them. That's what powers me, powers this show now. And when I do these radio things, I don't really talk politics. I just want it to be about the business. But you two gentlemen, you've got similar stories. You became Christians. You became followers of Christ Jesus, and you're both outspoken conservatives and still working in the business that despises you. What has that been like?
You want to go first? I've got a lot to say about that. For one thing, my brother Lee owns several Christian music stations. He's in Dahlonega, Georgia. He also has a station up in Spokane, Washington. There, he's been doing that for a long time, and he worked at KYMS down in Orange County for a while. That's where he really got the bug to do Christian radio. And then he wanted to be an owner. I told him not to, because I know that there's a lot of stress that comes with ownership, but he's done it and has done well. My brother, Michael, is Messianic, and he has a church in Oklahoma. My sister works for her church and ran a halfway house for both men and women, two of the men, and separate, obviously, for people who were nonviolent criminals for fellowship when they got out of prison, and has done a lot of work with women who have lost their children, trying to get them back. My brother Richard, who died about a year ago, was a pastor. And I come from a very religious family from the very beginning. My grandfather was hardcore Christian, Baptist. And I have studied religion for a long, long time. And to me, I really just believe that at the core of your life, you have to have belief in Christ, or certainly belief in God. I'm not judgmental about that, because I think everyone has to find their own way. I don't criticize anyone for how they worship. My brother Michael has very different ideas than I have about religion, but I respect that. The fact that he does have a very dedicated Christian, not necessarily Christian, is Messianic, but he has a strong belief in Yeshua, and he studies
That's
it.
the Hebrew name for Jesus, if anyone doesn't know.
Yeah. You would not believe the charts that he has. I mean, I was at his place a couple of months ago, and he's got a chart that's, I mean, it has the entire history of, of the Jewish faith and the families and all that stuff. It's like a chart. And I said, how do you do this? He said, well, it's a lot of work. I said, I could not do this. And he's very, very hardcore about that stuff. He does not like the word Jesus, because he said it is it's a creation of the Romans and all that stuff. And then my brother Lee argues with him about that, so it's kind of interesting when we get together. But they had, it's funny, because they had criticized me for not going to church every week. And I said, well, you tell me the church that Christ preached at, I'll go to that one. Although
that'd be a synagogue.
but I have been to synagogue, and I converted to Catholicism back in the 80s when I got married, because my wife at that time was Catholic, and I actually used to go on a pretty regular basis to have conversations with Father John Hall there at Holy Name Cathedral. So this is something that has not been casual with me. It's something that's been a quest, I guess you could say, because I want to learn as much as I can. And I think that someone who has a desire to nourish their spirit should do that, just as a matter of bettering themselves and coming from a position of knowledge rather than hearsay. A lot of times, and Father Hall told me this, he said, I wish more Catholics were as inquisitive as you are. He said, most Catholics, they do it by rote. They come in, and every week is the same and all that stuff. He said, but you have a definite, desire to learn about it. So we spent a lot of time together. And I think it's just, from my own personal perspective, it's important to learn as much as I can about those things, and also to learn about the history. I watch a lot of YouTube things that explain certain aspects of the way things in terms of belief have come about. Why do Jews not eat pork, for instance, is one of the things that I learned about. And a lot of that, which I won't go into, but a lot of that has to do with practicality rather than a religious reason. Plus that, I think that they understood that pork is something that can cause physical problems back then, because they didn't have refrigeration.
No refrigeration, right?
Yeah.
No way to preserve it.
Yeah, trichinosis, things like that. So if you take a look at many of the things that are in the Bible, rules, if you will, they actually have a very strong reason,
practical reason
for being, and it has to do with keeping yourself healthy.
Including the hand washing ceremony during the plague.
Definitely.
It was the Jewish people who, because they had that ceremony, they stayed, they survived when many
Yeah.
died.
And the 10 Commandments are not suggestions. And if you know, that there are a lot more than 10 Commandments. There are many.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as a Christian, it's important to learn as much as you can. You're never going to learn everything, but it's important to at least come from a position of knowledge when you make statements.
Did you grow up in the church, Bill? I did not. I did
I
not have that
did,
foundation.
and because Jeff says this, and my head instantly pops to Samuel Jackson in Pulp Fiction. Pig is a pig is a dirty animal. I ain't putting no pig. The whole thing. I don't know, for whatever reason my head went. I'm like, but to answer your question seriously, Charlie. When I was little in the 60s, I used to go to Sunday school. It was Catholic, pretty much. Most of my friends were Catholics. Grandmother was Catholic. I had a kind of a rough upbringing. I won't get into all that, but I lost my mom to alcoholism, and she remarried a cop who used to beat her up, but she died at 41 years old. So I found her face down on the couch. And
Oh
that's
man,
not super common knowledge, but moved around a lot and things
I
like
never
that.
knew.
But my grandfather was a Democrat, a Kennedy Democrat. My dad was a conservative. My dad, I everything I have is because of him, I think, and my grandfather. But it was morals, values, and ethics. I'm going to
Mhm.
raise you this way, that conservative way. Yeah, did I go to church? Yeah, I went to Catholic church in the young years. But I want to say I've evolved. I'm inquisitive. I like history. I like a lot of things about the world. I like to read about Jesus. My son is an avid Bible reader. My oldest son, who's 19, he
Good.
keeps the Bible crossed around his neck anytime he lines up on not to be clicky or anything, but points to the sky, and everything is, thank the Lord, for where I am and what I have.
Awesome.
And I try to live in that every day.
Yeah.
Well, how
Do
about
I
the
make
conservative?
mistakes?
How about the conservative side of things, though?
I don't really care what anyone thinks. I really don't. I think many of us are this way. I don't care what the left. I live my life with God in my heart, and common sense and logic, and
Yeah.
treat people the way they want to be treated.
Yeah.
The way I'd like to be treated.
Well,
I.
tell you, I have been ostracized. I've been criticized.
Yeah.
I've had my career hurt merely because I've taken political stances that
Right.
go
Right.
against
Right.
the norm and what you're supposed to say over on the other side. I'm
Mhm.
not part of that side now, and really never was. Have you
Right.
suffered any of that kind of?
I think, yeah, in my younger years, I think my career would have gone a lot farther. I wasn't into drugs. I'm not into drugs. Yeah, I
Mhm.
had my beers and I had a shot here and there and went to conventions as much as I went to Chico State, and it was the number one party school in the nation in the 80s.
It is.
But I don't I learned that that wasn't what life was about. So that part of it in the biz, as we know, when you go to conventions and you're around people and you're offered that. What I remember distinctly being in a room full of programmers and consultants, drugs going around quite avidly, being offered. And no thanks. I'm not, no thanks.
Good.
No thank you. And I almost felt like a judgment came down, right there and then.
Because you're not
It's
one
like,
of them.
okay, you're not one of me. You're not one of us. You're not in the clique. You're not in the
Yeah.
groove.
That's right.
And so I really felt that. And that was probably, when I was really starting out programming, we had just won Station of the Year at KWNZ here. I was the PD. We had one of the best books in 10 years. I was getting calls from different markets interested. And like you saying what you were saying, Charlie, about feeling like you're on top of the world right now. And then I felt a distinct change, a shift happen, almost like, hey, the word got out that, he's not in that clique. And I liken it to what we hear about Hollywood. I'm not going that. I'm not that's not where I am. It's never about what size market I'm in, or
Mhm.
whether you're going to click into the drug scene and hang out with your buddies just because you're groovy. No, I'm going to do my own thing, and I have a
Groovy.
stance on that. Yeah, yeah,
Grooving.
yeah.
You
I
must
use
be
a lot of
working in
those words.
oldies radio now.
Far out, groovy, all that stuff. And Jeff's a little older than I am, but I'm probably an old soul, as they say.
Yeah.
But
And and Jeff, on the conservative side of things, I've lost friends in the business and people I actually really respected and admired,
Yeah.
who we'd been friends for a while. And when I started, especially when Trump came along,
Yeah.
I've had them, including one that I'll go ahead and say his name because he's gone now, but John McFlanagan,
Oh
Hmm.
yeah,
one of my heroes,
John
was
McFlanagan.
so angry at me and wrote me the most heartbreaking letter on Facebook, and I can't associate with you anymore because of that. And I feel so strongly. I'm going, oh, come on, man.
Yeah. Well, there is a certain aspect of this which is disrespect. And if you are not willing to listen to someone's opinion, or at least try to find out why they think the way they do, then to me, that is a sign that you have no respect for that person. And I think it's important to listen to people. You can say, well, I don't really like the way you think, but I want to know why you think the way you think. And very often it deals on something that has nothing to do with anything intellectual, but it's more of how they feel. And that, to me, is probably the root of the whole Trump derangement syndrome. And the fact that the media has done a bang up job of villainizing Trump. And Trump, let's be honest, Trump is sometimes his own worst enemy. But the movement, the idea of conservatism, is, I think, the only thing that will save this country. Part of the problem there is that if you've got a liberal motive behind the way governance is done, then you spend a lot of money on things that don't need to be spent on because you are a little too generous with OPM, other people's money, meaning the taxpayers. And I think right now what they're doing, see, I was conservative almost from birth. My grandfather was a strong conservative, and I learned a lot from him growing up. And I just see that so many things that have gone by the wayside in terms of spending, like McCain said that Congress spends money like a drunken sailor. I think that was tame compared to the way it really is, because
Right.
we're trillions of dollars in debt, and that money did not get spent based on things that are essential to the
No,
governance of the United States. This is
no.
all these different programs that they put together, and
Craziness.
and well, they ignored things that I think end up being what's the word, appropriated for different things that really are not important to the total livelihood of the country. And it's like I explained it as layers of paint. One administration comes in and they decide to do one thing, and that's a layer of paint. Next administration comes in, they do something else, and they paint over the previous. The problem is that that layer of paint is still there from the previous administration, and it's piled on before nobody even knows what the wood looked like underneath all of that paint. And we still have programs that Doge, you can say what you want to about them. They've made mistakes, certainly, but you're going to make mistakes when you have a system that is so complex and so absolutely underground that it's almost impossible to find out what the hell has been going on.
Yep.
And I think they're trying to get to the bottom of it, but my intuition tells me they never will.
You have
Certainly,
federal agencies destroying evidence,
yeah, yeah,
deleting emails,
It-
burning and
yeah,
shredding documents,
yeah.
and you can't even stop them. You can't even get in there. This is insane what's happening.
Well, the deep state is so deep and so absolutely hard to figure out, and a lot of things are hidden purposely, and there's money that gets shifted from one place to the next. I think that many of the people that we have elected to Congress, whether they were corrupt before they were elected or not, they get corrupt very often. They see money and power. They like the privilege. They don't want to get rid of that. That's the reason why they keep getting reelected. I had a conversation with a friend of mine years ago who disagreed with me about term limits. And I said, the thing is, term limits are absolutely necessary to stop a lot of this stuff because they get up there. They said, well, people will elect those people, so they have the right to reelect them. I said, no, the people who get reelected because they have managed to make a name for themselves where someone coming up who does not have that name recognition doesn't have a chance. And
Right.
if you had term limits, you could certainly get rid of a lot of that abuse. And I'm not seeing much movement where that's concerned, even though there are a lot of people who want to instill term limits, but we really do have to do it.
I agree. I fully agree.
You know,
All the way across the board, for heaven's sake. I commercial here. If you want to be a part of the show and you want to help, you want to follow along, you want to see shows, you can catch me at rumble.com/DoNotTalk. If you follow that channel, you'll be helping. And if you're not on Rumble yet, please do. Yesterday, I'm still baffled that people don't know about Rumble. And I was telling a guy, yeah, here's where you can see my show. And it goes, oh, what is that? Is that some kind of a website? Yes, it's like YouTube. It's like YouTube, and it's where conservatives are not censored, and they have pledged that they're not going to.
yeah.
So a lot of because Russell Brand has left. Dan Bongino, before he got hired away, got his big government job. Thank God for that. He left YouTube, and a lot of people have gone over to Rumble. So go to rumbleplease.com, rumble.com/DoNotTalk, and follow that channel. You'll be helping me grow that way. Like this show. Hit that like button right now, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble. Hit that like button. You'll be helping this show. You want to financially help, CharLeeSimons.com with this spelling right here, CharLeeSimons.com, CharLeeSimons.com. You'll find PayPal there. You'll find a link to Give, Send, Go, which thank God for them. And Venmo. So everything you need, or you want to contact me, or you even want to be on the show like this, I got a schedule there. Click that calendar. And if it's something we come to an agreement, let me know what time and day, and you can put it all in right there. And I'll put you on if something I find interesting. CharLeeSimons.com. So, Jeff.
Yes.
How about you? You want to lay out your information for us right now?
Sure. It's my email is Jeff Davis at Jeff Davis at jeffdavis.com. And you can also check out my commentaries at thethoughtZone.com. I have a number of videos that I have put out for the Talk Nation, which is another side of mine. And I also have a book, which is called Echoes from the Canyon. It is
nice.
It's a book of poetry and art. It's available on Amazon. And I write under the name J.W. Davis. So hopefully people can go and
J.W.
pick that
Davis. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask you to hold that book up again. And some reason your camera's mirrored.
It's a little,
so it was back.
It's a little bit. Yeah, let me move over there. Keep
Echoes from the Canyon.
Yeah, it's got all kinds of artwork in there, and even has a cat. But it has
even has a cat.
all kinds of my artwork and some poetry and stuff like that. It's a fun book. I have a number of books that will be coming out this year. But this
Jeff
was
is one of those guys, Bill, that we radio DJs are not particularly known for our educational prowess. We're just goofy. We're kids. We're kids at heart, and we like to have fun, and we like to make it fun for everyone else around us. That's why one of our jobs on the side is usually being a DJ somewhere. But that's what we enjoy. But Jeff is one of those prolific thinkers. And a writer, and that's why he hung out with a man who I'm proud to call a friend, Paul Bryan, who we lost last year. He was one of those guys. So, Bill, you and I, we've been sandwiching greatness here. Jeff Davis, right in between us. I think
I know. I mean, I don't know Jeff personally, but I know of and all about him and in the circles. And so, congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. It started with my mother, believe it or not. She bought me a tape recorder when I was 15 and I got hooked, and she was always encouraging. She's 92 years old now and still with us, thank God. And she really set me on a path and has always been, over the many years, been my mentor in many, many ways. And I owe a great deal to her, and I certainly owe a great deal to God. And I was very blessed to have the success that I have. And I often think sometimes that I've been guided by that, and because we do have we all have things that come to us that come from somewhere that we don't know. I always say I've got an angel on each shoulder, because there are many times when I thought that I was not going to be successful, or something came in and rescued me at the last minute. It's just wonderful to have that feeling and know that you're not alone. And I think people who believe in God, have a strong faith in Christ, I think that they also feel that they are not alone, and there's somebody always with them who has their back.
You know why that is,
Absolutely.
Jeff? That's in Scripture. We
Mhm.
are given a peace beyond all understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord. Bill, how do we find you? How do we follow along? And especially, how do we listen to your internet station that is
Well, I
very
actually
well?
have one of my promotional items, Totally Retro Radio and it's on Live 365. You can go there and just search Totally Retro Radio, make it a favorite. That's spend what I spend most of my time doing these days. I hate the word retirement because, I guess that's my grandfather kind of went till he was 93 years old. But
Wow.
um, long story short, I have the radio bug. I'll always have it. This is a throwback to what we remember. Maybe not quite as far back as you go, Jeff, but I grew up during the '60s at WRKO in Boston and KFRC in San Francisco. So that all inspired me to do radio when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. Went to bed with it every night. I'm a little younger. I'm 62, so I started in the early to mid '80s, but knowing all about it and being inspired by people like yourself. And so I created this radio station. It's a throwback top 40. And if you see at the bottom of the sticker, it says, "We are a trip back in time." And that's what it's meant to be. It's '80s and '90s,
That's
but
cool.
it's like the hot hits style format,
Mm,
with Mitch Craig as my voice guy, who I've worked with since the '80s.
I like him.
Um,
Yeah.
and Jam Jingles, old
Oh,
Z100 stuff.
that's awesome. I hope it's making you some money. It's hard to make
I do
money.
too.
I
Well,
had a
not as
country
much as I
station
would
for a while.
like, not as much as you two, but it's building, and I just built a new mobile studio for it, so we're going to be on the streets this year. It
That's
started
great.
kind of as
Speaking
a
of mobile
labor of love.
studios, do you still
Yeah,
have the Sturgeon?
I don't own it. My friend Chris, who is a former KFRC promotions guy, I sold it to him. He has it in California now, so he does take it to various events. One being the American Graffiti Museum, where all the cars
Which
are,
is
and
happening in just a couple of weeks, I think.
yeah, and he'll be doing
Mhm.
that again. And he brings it to the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, which another one will be coming up, I think, next September. But we brought it down when Sue Hall and Bobby Ocean and all those guys and folks were inducted. Jane
Shotgun
Dornacker
Tom.
and it's amazing. You were at one of the ones down in Modesto,
I loved it.
and so Tom. Uh, Thinking of him with the hat from K Earth. You
Shotgun.
just said him.
Shotgun
Yeah,
Tom.
Shotgun.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shotgun Tom.
Yeah.
He was there, and so a lot of folks, old radio boss jocks and folks that have been in the business for a long time. But the sturgeon's still there. It was a blast. It's on my wall over here. If I could turn this far enough, you'll see it on. You'll see a picture of it sitting up there as it was, and I'll walk with it just so everyone can see it.
And he's gone. Yeah.
Temporarily.
Thanks for showing us that, Bill.
That's what it looks like at midnight in a coal mine.
In the Caldecott Tunnel after the lights have gone out.
And no signal, by the way.
No signal. That's right.
The tunnel.
All right, my friend. Man, such a pleasure getting to finally talk with you and meet you and get to hear your story. Thank you very much, Bill Shakespeare. Thank you very much, Jeff.
I
I'm
enjoyed
back.
it.
I'm
There you
sorry.
are. Great.
Oh, that's all right,
But
buddy. No
You
worries.
came out of the tunnel and the frequency came back in.
All right, my brother from another mother. Talk to you later. That was a lot of fun, man. I love that. And that was episode number 6 of the Hitmen. So I hope to keep doing this. I hope you enjoy it. If you can like it, if you can share it, that would be nice. Share these shows with others, and especially if you're like us, a media person. Hopefully you got something out of it and learned something, reminisced. These guys were saying things that I was like, oh man, I got a story about that. And that's how it is. We can sit there for hours and talk about this kind of stuff. But I appreciate you very much for sharing, supporting this show at charliesimons.com, financially supporting. Thank you very much. I don't have any advertisers. I got an affiliate with mypillow.com, and you use my middle name Lee as a promo code. You can get significant savings. Over 100 products, I think over 200 now at his online store. Mike Lindell, I'm talking about. Talk about a patriot. Talk about a not shy patriot. He's going to do the right thing one way or the other, even though all the big box stores pulled his products off the shelves. He went online, mypillow.com/Lee, mypillow.com/LEE will take you right to the page with all the savings you can get using my name, or just go to mypillow.com and use my middle name Lee as the promo code at checkout. May God bless you and keep you. That's the most important thing. May God bless America, but ultimately, above all else, America bless God.